Welcome to AMIcast, podcast about Amiga computers. I'm your host, Krzysztof Radzikowski, but call me Krzysztof or Radzik. Hi again, AMIcast is online and episode is number 25. And I have a guest, Matthias from Germany. The guy is known from hardware projects that you can find on German Amiga forum details, I think. That's why we want to speak and say it more in English. Hi.
Hi. Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm fine. Surviving is quite hot in Germany, I think. Here, I don't know, Berlin maybe is a little bit different, but you are from Berlin, yes?
Yes, I'm from Berlin. I'm a native Berlin guy living here. And actually, I would say the weather is quite perfect. No clouds, 25 degrees. That's what summer should be.
Yeah, exactly. Be like. Berlin is a very nice city, so I was only one time there, but it's really a cool city, very international and quite big. But the S-Bahn are really good and U-Bahn and so on. So this is the metro and train stuff in Germany. So the connections are quite amazing, really cool.
Yeah, it's that's one thing.
Okay, so I don't know how to exactly genau because I live in Germany. I sometimes put the German word. Sorry, I don't know how to exactly pronounce your nickname. Matze. I don't know. This is more in German style.
It's Matze.
Matze. Yeah. So it's like
that's German. That Matze. That.
Good. So we will stay with Matze or Matthias. It's as well German name. Okay, so you made a lot of projects for Amiga Classic, and they are really impressive. But before we start with this, could you say something more about your story with Amiga? How it started and why Amiga or this IT stuff, that everybody started from us somehow.
Yeah, so right now I'm 38 years old, and as with many guys in my age, the Amiga was my first computer. Actually, my mom bought it, and she was teaching video techniques. So she someday she came up with the idea, let's buy a computer, because I have a colleague of mine said, you can do amazing video editing stuff with the computer, and now you can hardly afford it. And so from one day to another, Amiga 3000 appeared in our household, and that was a great day. And before that, I had some contact with some C64 machines of my friends. But when I got this Amiga 3000, I think it was in 1991 or something around there. That was like, what a huge machine! But the first disappointment came up quite close, because a friend of mine, he owned an Amiga 500, and he gave me some games, and they didn't work on the Amiga 3000, because the Amiga 3000 had this soft kickstart thingy at that age, and that was a little bit of prep. But then after half a year or so, the developers started to adopt to the new kickstart, and all the games started running. And so as a young guy, I didn't do something and a lot with computers, except of playing games. But then I started to write my homework on it, because I have very bad handwriting, and my teachers always says I can't read this. And then so I was a pure Amiga or a pure computer user, which had an Amiga at home, and that was the beginning. But it fascinated me, so I've chosen to study the whole thing, and I studied a nice subject which is available at our university in Berlin, which is computer engineering, which is half electric engineering, half computer science, which is perfectly fit for hardware design and all this stuff, and that's what I learned. And then I studied, and then I worked, and along the way I sold my Amiga, of course, like I think it was in the late 90s, because Commodore broke down and it wasn't up to date anymore, and I couldn't do anything. And I have to admit that I really lost any trust in the whole thing, because it was going nowhere from my point. And then in 2011 it came back. So like the retrovirus hit me, and then I built up all my knowledge from these days, and I came up with all these hardware. Actually, all my hardware was because I needed it. I was saying, I need this thing, but it was too expensive on eBay, so I can build it on my own. That's much cooler, and that's how I came up with the idea of building retro hardware for computers, for Amigas.
Yeah, cool. This is the first. It's quite impressive, because most of Amiga guys start with 500, and 3000 is the dream computer. I think still the best Amiga, or people say that this is the best Amiga ever. I never had the 3000, but it's quite nice. It was desktop, yes, I think, not tower.
Yes. Yes, I had a desktop. I think I wouldn't say that it's really the best, but it is definitely it lacks ARGA chipset, but what really, it has it looks nice. Yeah? If you look at an Amiga 4000, it looks like a PC desktop computer, because actually it is a PC case modified with a different front, but it's a standard PC case they used at the and the Amiga 3000 was designed. It was like a little bit like this Apple thing, that you had a nice that you see that they thought about it. On the other hand, but many people say, I have to admit it hit me that I had the problem too. It was overheating, the Amiga 3000. So if I at the end, I was a little bit of doing some 3D stuff with Lightwave and Imagine, and I was the problem was when you were rendering some kind of objects or some kind of scene, some spaceships exploding or whatever, you could and then it lasted for the whole night. And then on the next day, your Amiga overheated, and the overheated of the Amiga 3000 couldn't write to the SCSI disk. So you saw that the image was ready, and it says saving to disk, and then it crashed. This was the most disappointing thing ever, because you were just, it finished, it looked nice, but it's gone, and you have to push reset. And that was like always, I cried so often, and because it was so hard, because one image lasted for really was like for 8 hours, and that was a time when I started to leave the case open, because then it didn't overheat and everything was fine. No, I would just want to say that. From my point of view, the Amiga 3000 is the most beautiful Amiga from the desktop line, and it is a very, very good computer, because you can extend it very well. But the best Amiga, you have to define what best is. Yeah, if you look at the Amiga 500, I think if I would say what is the Amiga, then I would say, it's the Amiga 500, because that was what everyone thinks of if he looks at it. Not the Amiga 1000, it was like the grandfather, but the Amiga 500 was the thing which was let young guys' hearts faster.
It's the most popular, and I think, as I heard, nowadays Amiga 500 and 2000 are the easiest to repair, because they are not using this let's say new technology, this with PCBs, and I'm not hardware guy in this situation, but I heard that this is easy to repair compared to 1200 or something like that.
Yeah, that's true, but it's mostly because of the it's old technology, and it's definitely more robust. I have a board which was an Amiga 2000 board. The guy gave it to me, and it came from a house where there was a flooding, and it was completely and it was covered with mud. There was like a 1 centimeter thick layer of mud on the board. And I said, okay, what should I do with this thing? And I just put it in the dishwasher, and because it's ruined, so what the heck? And I put it in the dishwasher, and I dried it, and I plugged it in, and it worked. And it says, okay, that's great. It survived a flood and a dishwasher.
This is cool. I have at home 2000, but now from classic most I use the Vampire with 600. So I believe it will be okay, but yeah, this is the okay. But let's maybe stop it, and because it will be really hardware episode. So you already let us know how you started with this hardware design for classic Amiga. Maybe can you tell us what the first project you made for yourself and for others? Because as I know, all your projects are let's say available on, for example, GitHub, yeah?
Many of them have a label on GitHub, and some of them don't. The very old ones doesn't have any GitHub because I was too lazy to put them on GitHub too. But I think I have to do some cleaning up my mess and to put a lot of things to GitHub because that's more accessible. Yeah, but you asked about my first project. The first project I had was actually the 14 megahertz turbo board, and in the first revision because the motivation of it was like so in 2011 I got a Amiga 500 again. I bought it on eBay. It was in very bad conditions. Yeah, I paid about €6, but it was great bargain, and I wanted to and I remembered, oh, in those days you were playing this PC port, Wing Commander and Frontier, and I made the big mistake of trying to play Wing Commander on an Amiga 500 because I had an Amiga 3000 and nothing was a problem with demanding games on that time, and I tried to play it and I thought, oh, this is not playing, this is like slideshow and random shooting at random points, and so it's okay, I really need a faster Amiga. And then I looked on eBay and said, okay, but the acceleration cards in 2011 were I said, oh, it's old crappy hardware. I won't pay like 50 or 70 euros for an acceleration card, which probably doesn't work. And then I looked on the Aminet because I knew it from the old days. And I said, oh, the Aminet is still online. And I browsed there in the hardware section, and I found a cheap 14 megahertz accelerator, and I looked at the design and said, oh, that's easy to make, you can do this. And so I decided, okay, I will redo this PCB with modern design. And then I remembered that all the Amigas, they suffer from turbo boards with no hardware and with no memory, like the Supra 28 or some at-speed card. They don't have memory, and they gives you a bit of speed gain, but they really don't make your Amiga really faster. So I said, okay, I need some fast memory, and then I discovered this project on the German Amiga A1K forum, and there was a guy who made an SRAM, a static RAM card, just to plug it in the Amiga 500 and nothing more. So that's exactly the thing I need, and I just took these two projects and I put them together and said, so yeah, and then I rooted the whole thing. It was quite funny learning all the stuff because actually I'm doing software right now. I'm not doing hardware anymore. That's the curse of hardware designers. At some point you have to decide if you want to go to software and hardware. And Berlin has a lot of software companies, but only a few hardware companies, and that's why I stuck there. And yeah, finally I made this PCB and I tested it, and it didn't work at the first time, of course, because I had to do some fixes, and but after 2 or 3 tries, it worked, and this was like great thing. I built my first turbo board, and it had a 2 megabyte option, and it was pumping the CPU to 40 megahertz, and with this performance, you could hardly play Wing Commander, but it worked, and so the goal achieved, and I published the whole thing to the A1K community because they gave me all the information for this SRAM thing back, and then the people were amazed of all the stuff, and at the same time the Amiga community in Berlin reawakened and made up some regular meetings, and so I went there and we discussed things, and then a guy told me, that there is this cheap IDE solution on the AmiNet as well. Or was it on the AmiNet? And then he gave me a link, and then there was a guy from Finland who built up a very, very cheap IDE solution. And so you have to combine this with your turbo board, and yeah, then I did it, and this was like the result we have right now, like a 40 megahertz turbo board with no programmable logic, just discrete logic, lacks some typical Amiga features like autoconfig and all this stuff, but it works, and you have an IDE connector. You still need a disk drive to boot from it, but on the other hand, it works, and you have and you can build it by yourself, and it costs like $30 or $40 if you buy all the parts by your own. Then that's a fair gain, and you have this feeling of building your own turbo board.
Yeah, this sounds really cool.
About speed.
Can you say, because I'm really bad at soldering or something, how hard is to build something, do it yourself, basically, or it is possible to buy this hardware somewhere, for example, that somebody is doing this, or maybe you are doing for some guys this hardware, for example?
That's a hard topic. I think it's not so hard to learn proper soldering, and there are like tons of videos on YouTube how to learn to solder. The first thing is, or one very important thing is, you need good equipment. Yeah, it's like if you have a bad saw, you cannot chop a tree because your saw will not work. So you really need at least a temperature regulated soldering iron for about 30 to 50 euros, but that's an investment for your life. Yeah, it will work. And then then I suggest to do some training. Yeah, take some old PCBs and try to desolder some of the components over there and learn how to do and resolder them. That's quite a thing. I really would like to sell my hardware or make my hardware available, but I live in Germany and I do a lot of stuff here, and I know that a lot of people are just looking what I'm doing and try to let's say stop me what I'm doing because I'm ruining their business. This, or at least I suspect them to do so. But and the problem in Germany is, if you are selling ready-to-run hardware, you have to register to so many administrative things, and I have to pay such a big amount of money just to do so, that I really say, I will not. I really fear of selling it all the stuff, because I cannot offer you this set for do-it-yourself for 40 euros if I have to assemble it. Even if putting it on a professional assembly line, it costs like 10 or 20 bucks for one PCB. That would be like 50 euros, or let's say 55 euros. But then I cannot sell it for you because I have all the risk, I have all the registration things, and all that's bad stuff. I really hate it. That's Germany at its best, and I'm really not happy about my country at this point. That's why I will only make it available as like do-it-yourself kits. You can. I have and I will. Yeah, we sell it from private with no profit. And we just take the parts, put it in there to save all the bills. So if the financial authority comes to us and says you have a business, that we can at least prove that we make no profit out of it, and that we just put that we buy stuff and sell it to other guys, and that's the mode how it's tolerated somehow, and no one takes care about it. But if I would sell it to you with a little bit of profit, then I have to build up an issue and a business, and I have a family to run, I have a job to do, and that's simply too much time for bullshit, and I don't like it. That's perhaps not too lazy, but that's mainly the point.
I fully understand this, because basically, like, I think in whole Europe you must make company to sell something if you are selling this somehow, yeah. So this is maybe you can outsource this to, I don't know.
Yeah,
outside.
I did it. I did it with one of my projects. As you said that I made this graphic card, and I did exactly this thing. I have with a friend, and we made it the official way, and then I realized how much more how much more expensive the product becomes just to make it the official way. And then you say, oh, that's really, really bad thing, because if I sell you a turbo card for 40 euros and it doesn't have like auto config and it doesn't have auto boot, then it's fine for you. But if I have to sell it to you for 60 euros because of all the administrative stuff, and then I have to put tax on, so 80 euros at least, then he says, oh, for 80 euros I can buy something else which has all these auto boot features and all the stuff installed, like for instance the A case from Jens Schönfeld. And that's exactly the point. He produces them, and some people say, "Oh, he's expensive." But if you look at it, if he sells something for 120 euros, then 20% is taxes. So he just gets 100 euros, and then you see 20%, $20 for producing it and the parts, and all of a sudden you realize that he doesn't get that much money from it, and that's fair, and that would be approximately the same price I have to put on it if I would produce it, perhaps a little bit less, but that wouldn't make it like a cheap solution, and it would get away with and you wouldn't get this I have done by myself thing.
Just my question here, because you already, I think, explained, but a lot of people from Amiga community are complaining about the price of NG hardware, especially Amiga OS 4 hardware. But I think the reason why the prices are so high is basically has the same background plus low volume, of course, to this. Yeah, Am I right? Oh my god.
Yes, I think so. That the Amiga OS 4 Power PC hardware was a very low volume, and all this next generation stuff like some cyber graphics, cyber vision boards, and Power PC boards, and they were in the end days. There are only a few ones. That's one thing. But on the other hand, there is I suspect that's not because it's a collective item of some people or some people who use it. I think that there is a really big amount of people who just buy the hardware, not exactly wanting it, and not that they don't want to make profit, but they think, oh, I can buy it. Perhaps it's nice to have them, and if I don't want it anymore, I can sell it for more in 2 or 3 years, and that's, of course, a bad attitude, or from my point of view. That's why I've put a lot of projects as well. I don't want that the people, for instance, if they want to, I've seen like these graphic boards on eBay, and it says, oh, they are paying 200 euros for a 20-year-old graphic card with very low performance, and say, so why should someone pay so much for old hardware and you're not even sure about it if it works? And for PowerPC stuff, it's more extreme, because it's and the whole next generation thing. If you think about this Amiga X5000, all the stuff, these are low volume things, and there's always some guy beside it who spent a whole year or years on development, and he wants to get paid. And a good engineer can ask for about 50,000 a year, or should be able to ask for so much. So paying him his salary and by selling like 100 Amiga X5000, you can count it. That's quite a big amount he had to put on the price if he just wants his time back. But that's why we all do it on hobby, and still is expensive. Don't never underestimate the volume gain in production. Yeah, if you're like Samsung and put up with a mobile phone and say, oh, I want 5 million of it per week, then you get different grades on the chips. If you say, I want 100 of these chips.
Yeah.
That's a big.
Yeah, this is the. But maybe one more question. If I would like to buy the old hardware, for example, because sometimes this, for example, I want to have the Cyberstrom, so there is maybe not other solution, maybe for now. So do you think it is quite safe to buy the good card? Because as I see on eBay, AmiBay, the cards are, let's say, updated, repaired. And do you think this card can live 10 years or something like this? Do you know what I mean? When I spent some thousands of euros, I would like to use this hardware for some years, yeah?
Yeah, it's you cannot prove it. The main reason, for instance, the Cyberstorm accelerator cards, these Cyberstorm Power PCs, they mainly die because they put a Mach chip from AMD on it, and this chip is notorious to overheating, and if ICs, they degenerate if they are run too hot for a long time. So you cannot really say it, but I cannot give you advice because it's it might be well repaired, but it might be the job may be done quite bad, and there aren't. For instance, if you have this programmable logic component, which is on all these boards, because actually all these boards are modified PC VGA cards, and they are adopted somehow to the Amiga, and the adoption chip. This is like completely ghost in the box. You cannot look inside. There are no files to reprogram it, and if this chip breaks, then your card is just for decoration. Put it on the wall, or to go and take some spare parts or other things. Yeah, that's the hard story. Some people have some and have the codes because they asked the old companies, and some of the companies gave them away from free, or said, oh yeah, take it. But some people, for instance, Phase 5 or DCE, they didn't do it because they were doing this business till the end, and then they stopped business. And as far as I know, at a certain point they just deleted all the files, which is like, oh my god, they deleted all the stuff. But yeah, now it's gone. Perhaps there is some backup somewhere, but who knows?
Okay, so again, another question besides of your work. What do you think about this Phase 5? Because there's hearing that they are coming back somehow. And do you think this is possible that, or it makes sense to make the old hardware with the new chips, I think so, and sell it on our market? It's really interesting that they are coming back, but I'm not sure they are really coming back.
Yeah, there is some people met the guy behind it on some fairs, and they say that they are not sure if he can really promise what he's saying. That's the whole thing. And a lot of people say that he definitely has some development stuff from Phase 5, and he has some amazing stuff. But on the other hand, they see that if he says everything that he has everything he proclaims to do, then he would have been ready right now, or at least have like a working prototype. So either he doesn't have it, or he is somehow slow, or not doing very seriously. I can't just presume things like it. I personally would do nothing before something really happens on that there's a product, and just be the second one. That's, of course, it's a risk that the first comers just buy everything then, but I wouldn't spend like I think he on Facebook he posted like the same prices than in the good old times, but with a euro sign behind it. So like thousands of euros for this and this, and I wouldn't pay €1,000 of a hardware which is not which I've never seen in real, and I'm not trusted there. And if there are like really if there are some people who say, so I have this hardware, let them be the stupid ones buying the first thing, and not yourself. That's my opinion about this whole stuff.
Okay, yeah, because this is an interesting topic, but now I think we should go back to your hardware, and I think the one of the most interesting is 030 processor, so the card with 030 processor mounted to the somehow socket, or to the processor. So for Amiga 500, I think 2000 and CDTV, for example, and can you say us, because jumping from simple acceleration like we talked before, 030 acceleration is, I think, not so easy to do. And how it's happened, and it was really so hard to do, and it is.
It happened. Actually, it happened a little bit by accident. A guy gave me a very nice turbo board for those days, the Harms Professional 030, which was a processor board for the Amiga 500, to plug in the processor in the CPU slot. But, and this was the big but, it had no memory on it, but a very large connector on one side where you could plug in an optional memory option. And then I looked at the connector and said, oh, that's just a standard Eurocard connector. And I began to measure how this connector is connected to the CPU. And so I thought, oh, that's the complete 030 bus on the side. And I looked at the memory board. I looked at the images of the memory. I didn't own one of these memory boards on my own. And then I started building the same SRAM interface I had on my first acceleration card for this turbo board, of course with 30-bit of bandwidth and not 16 bits of bandwidth, but and it was like really big mess of wires. It was like 1 kilometer of wires on the small PCB, and I did it all by my hand, and surprisingly it worked quite fast. And I was like, yes, that's great. But then one of the cables fell off and it didn't work, and I had to resolder it. And then yes, it works again. And then I brought it to a friend of mine, and I wanted to show it to him. And then he dropped the card, and of course a lot of cables came off, and it says, okay, that's no solution. I have to make a proper PCB. And then it says, okay, proper PCB. And okay, I need 2 megabytes of RAM is quite low, and so I take 4 megabytes. And then I had this IDE solution. I have to put IDE as well, and that was the idea. And I made a board for the old Harms card with 4 megabytes of RAM and an IDE connector. And I learned how the bus protocol of the 030 processor was working, and it worked like a charm. Was great stuff. And then in Germany you say I licked blood, and then I said, oh yeah, but the Harms turbo card has only 40 megahertz, and you can't put it up to 50, but not with this PCB. And then I decided to myself, so okay, I switched to a TikTok system. I have a working memory interface low performing CPU interface. Now I built up a high performing CPU interface because I know that the memory interface is already working, which is great for debugging. That you have a thing which theoretically works and you don't know and you're quite sure that there are no bugs inside it, or at least only a few bugs. And then it took me about a year to develop this 030 card. But it worked, and then I had these 030 card, and I could reuse my old 4 megabyte card on the side as an extension, and that was the whole board. Right now, as you know, I've done TIG, I've done TOC, and now I'm back to TIG again. And one of my current projects is, of course, now a 64 megabyte expansion card for this processor on the other side to upgrade the memory side again. And then I will go back to TOC and perhaps make an upgrade to the CPU.
This is 64 megabytes of RAM is really quite nice in classic Amiga, so it's nice. Maybe connected with this is one question, because I talked with some guys in Poland and they told me that building the acceleration with a 040 processor, it's completely a different story. It's not so easy to have, let's say, new boards with something more than this, let's say, lower CPUs. Can you tell something to us from this hardware point of view, or it is possible to do, or it makes sense, or make no sense?
It works. I have one working. My Amiga 500 actually runs with an 060 CPU at my place. It's but it is. There is another German guy, Georg Braun. He made a lot of terrific projects. He built a replacement Amiga 1000 board with with great stuff on it, and he actually developed 68060 acceleration card for his computer, and I bought one of these cards and adopted it because it just plugs in a 60030 processor socket, and I have one on my accelerator. I just plugged it in, made some adoption, and it runs works like a charm. But of course, it is a very, very complicated story because now I have to go a little bit into details. The 68020 and 030 processors, they have a very, very nice feature called automatic bus sizing. This means that you can the processor has a 32-bit wide memory bus for accessing all the memories, but you can just say to the processor, now if you access this address, this bus is actually only 16-bit wide. So in theory, this is a problem, because if you want to access the other half of the 32 bits, then you can't see it because the hardware is only on the 60 on the other side of the bus. But the 020 and 030 processors, they have an automatic detection to say, oh, if the bus width is only 16, then we switch the whole protocol to a 16-bit bus buffer and just do it on this side. And they do it. You don't have to do anything about it. They just do it by implemented by Motorola. The downside of the whole story is that it costs a little bit of performance, and you could not make higher frequencies than 50 megahertz with this protocol. And it was quite nasty for Motorola. And it said so. And the very, very fast access you can do only on 32 bits, because we need one extra clock for decoding if it's 16 or even 8-bit. And when they switch from the 030 to the 040 processor and finally to the 060 processor, they say, oh, we don't put bus sizing in this new processor anymore. It's a pure 60 and 32-bit wide processor, and that's hard for the hardware developers, because now they have to emulate this nice 68030 behavior and to the 040 processor, and then adopted to the very old 68K processor interface of the Amiga 500 or 2000. So actually, all these 040 cards for the Amiga 2000s are basically an adaptation from the 40 processor to the 30 processor, and from the 30 processor to the simple 68K interface, or at least they have to do a little bit like this, and that's what it makes so complicated, because you have to do you have to adopt, and that's that makes it hard. But it's you can do it, and the companies on those days showed it, and now we have all the equipment that the people of those they dreamed of. Yeah, you can go on eBay and buy a 32-channel logic analyzer for about 50 or 100 euros. You can buy an oscilloscope going up to 100 megahertz sample frequency for 300 euros. Those oscilloscope of these days, they cost like a big Mercedes in those days, and they couldn't afford it, and so they have to try to find some workarounds for it. And now it's so easy for us to get the dream equipment of those days.
Okay, so sounds good. This means in future we can expect more cool hardware for classic Amiga?
Yes, definitely. I will. One of my I have an Amiga 4000 Tower here running with this 68060 card from Georg Braun. I built an adapter to there, and it runs, but it's not stable. It crashes like every 20 minutes. So you can do it, and you can work for 20 minutes, and then it somehow freezes. So after in theory, it works, and I have all the things I need to do. So and I said, Georg did a great job, but his design has some flaws as well. And so I just do all. I picked up my ideas, but I spoke to him and said, so actually he didn't made a lot of ideas by himself. He just picked up the Motorola user guide and assembly instructions to how to be. Actually, Motorola made a reference implementation to adopt an 040 processor to an 030 system, and so I read this and take all the ideas there, and I hope that during this year I will come up with the first working prototypes of an 060 card for the 3000, 4000, and perhaps for the Amiga 500 too.
Looks like that the big Amigas are not so... there are no new hardware for big Amigas. So would be nice to have something, because...
Yeah, exactly. It is, it's definitely, if you look at the answer, the answer is in the volumes. Yeah, if you look at what Commodore sold, and then you see like they sold like more than 1 million Amiga 500 in Germany, but only I think 20 or 30,000 Amiga 3000 and 4000 together. So that's like it's 4% of the volume, and a lot of these computers, or if you bought a high-end machine, then I was like the big exception that I had in my private home a high-end machine, but usually you had it because you had work to do on this machine, not playing games. And these people, they threw away all the stuff. As I told you, the guy who told my mom that you could do video stuff with Amiga, and he threw away his whole Amiga video editing platform in the early 2000 years. And I met him because he's a good friend of our family, and I met him and I told him, like in 2012, I'm back in the Amiga retro thing, and do you have some of your old hardware? Oh no, I just threw it away. It's worthless. And then he told me the hardware he had, and it was like, oh my god, this is like the dream hardware. All the computers that you could sell it on eBay for thousands of euros. I said, no way. So yes, he wouldn't believe it. Yeah, and that's the I think that happened to a lot of these big box Amigas, that they were really used by professionals, and they get rid of it because in a certain time if you're working with this thing, you don't have time for nostalgia. You just have to work and earn money, and then you don't care if it's a Mac or a PC or Amiga. You take what fits best to you. Sad but true.
Yeah, true. In my old company, we threw the whole stuff like the SGI workstation, the RS6000 from IBM. It was the amazing. This is I took only PowerPC processor from them, but the whole was going to trash.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. With big monitors, there was, I don't know, 24 inches or something. This is profi stuff. Yeah.
So, but coming back to
yeah, this is the no more nostalgia for profi
exactly.
work.
So, but I'm definitely working on the I just want to say that I definitely work on this CPU issue because there was this collective order of because a guy came up with old Amiga 4000T boards from the which were like he bought somewhere, like he had like a box of these, and then he organized some parts of it, and I was one of the lucky guys who bought one of these assembly sets, and so I assembled it on my I soldered my 4000T board by myself, but there's no CPU card on it. So, and I was like, oh great, I have a computer with no CPU, and usually I do all the hardware because I need it, and then I just give it to the others and say, if you need it to go, and I help you rebuilding it. But that's my first motivation, and so my motivation of building a processor card which fits in an Amiga 3000, 4000 is quite high for them at the moment.
It sounds good, really, because probably if everything will be okay, you will be the almost first guy that can do it for the big Amigas. So I think this is cool. And maybe now let's talk about the graphic card, because you made as well A500 Graca called. So I have the Picasso 2 in my 2000, and it's cool car, but the problem is these old cards for Amiga, they are not so powerful with the LCD display, to get the HD ready or something more. So this is nice to have some, let's say, new design for graphic solution.
Yeah, I built this card. Actually, at these days I work together with Georg Braun, and we talked about this project, and he built up a graphic board for his replacement Amiga 1000, and asked him, Georg, can I use can I use your design, or can we work together to make this card work on Amiga 500? And he said, in theory it must work, but I've never done it. He's a little bit like me, and he says, but I have no motivation because I don't own an Amiga 500. So you have to do it by your own. And then I started doing it by my own, and I built up the first prototype, and it worked, and I built up a second one. And another thing is that Georg, he's very keen in building machines that could have been built in those days with exactly those parts, like a pure retro computer with 20-year-old chips, or chips which are at least for 20 years on the market. But I said, that's okay, but from my point of view, there is no need to use the crappy part of the past. So let's do let's take the good part of the present and take some modern chips for this and this, because they aren't Amiga anymore. They're just like regular programmable hardware. And so I developed a card and built it up with a CPLD, which is the successor of the old GAL programmable logic devices. It's not yet an FPGA, but it's like the predecessor of the FPGAs. And I built this graphic board. Another friend of mine, he worked at Villagetronic, and he said, so yeah, in those days at Villagetronic, they had a prototype working on an Amiga 500, but the developer died and quite in an accident. It was quite a big shock for the company, and so the project never became ready. So he said that it's actually possible to do so, and I said, okay, I take the fastest chip for the I take the fastest VGA chip for the Zorro 2 interface, which comes from the Piccolo SD68, and tried to make the computer think it's a Picasso 2 board, because building hardware is the one part, building a driver is the other thing. Yeah, and I didn't, I had no idea how to build the driver at that point. So I made a board which looks like a Villagetronic product to use the Villagetronic drivers. But in the background, it is a Piccolo SD chip, because this chip is much faster than on the Picasso 2 and Picasso 2 Plus boards. And that's how my graphic card evolved at the end. But if it comes to high resolutions, I have a little bit to disappoint you. It still has only 2 megabytes of RAM, so you can run 1280 by 1028 pixels, but only in 8-bit. And so if you want to, that's a bit of the downsides of it. It's a bit. It is. I have to admit that I did this because it has this Zorro 2 interface, and you need the same amount of memory as a backup memory on your turbo card for double buffering. And at those days, as you notice, I had only a 68030 card with a 4 megabyte card, so it made no sense to me to build a graphic card with more than 2 megabytes, because I wouldn't have any fast RAM to work with my Amiga. And that was actually one of the reasons why I stick to 2 megabytes. And another thing is, I wanted to go to 4 megabytes later on, but I've implemented an ISA interface between the VGA chip and the Amiga. And then somewhere in the specs it said, so now if you use this chip in ISA interface, you cannot use the 4 megabyte option, but only 2. And they said, damn, I have to do everything from scratch again. And I said, so no, that was too far. So the board has only 2 megabytes because I thought it's sufficient. And some people say it's not, but there's always someone wanting more. And I'm quite happy with this, because I really gave all the efforts. I gave it to a friend who has an electric interference chamber to check it and all this stuff and see how stable it is. And he was amazed by the product. He said, "Oh, that's great stuff, because it's better than the old stuff from those days." It's just and mainly it's just because you have. Producing a PCB nowadays is so much better. It's so much more accurate than those days, like 20 years ago, because the companies, they are used to produce 10-layer boards for ATX PC stuff, and now I come with a 4-layer board. That's that's quite cheap technique right now. But 20 years ago, a 4-layer board was 4 layers. That's really expensive, and no one did it.
Yeah, I don't even in my company that we are making the PC. I'm not making the PCB, but the other guys, and this is the five layers. Is okay. It's peanuts. So it's different. Yeah, this is true. But basically, as I understand from your projects, I can build my cool Amiga 500. In this situation, I can build better processor, some graphic card. So, do you plan some sound card, for example?
Sound. I'm really not in that sound card thing because I'm the visual guy. That was my specialty at the university, and there is and I have to admit I thought about doing some think about this audio thing, but then a friend of mine, he actually the guy who worked at Villagetronic, he said, "Oh, he is working on a power replacement, like a small PCB with a digital interface on the Polar audio chip on the Amiga." And I said, "Oh, that's great, because this is then you don't have and this would like boost the quality of the sound a bit." And I'm not in that, and so I stopped there because I didn't want to. Somehow, no, it was his project, and he helped me with my project to make it run. And I didn't want to build some project he's doing, and I will give him advice as long as I can do it. And so we just split up our hobbies. That's and I have to admit that he's a little bit slower than I am, but he's a good guy, and he works constantly on the thing, and he's working and working and. But it's so we're friends, and I won't make a project, etc., because this would, I think, put a bad shade on it, on the whole thing. If I put something else, and yeah, that's the whole story about it. I'm not that interested, and a good friend of mine is doing something, and so sound cards, I say, are not my main topic.
Okay. So maybe another question with the hardware. Do you think it is possible to make the Bluetooth hardware for Amiga besides of the drivers, because somebody must write the drivers, but Bluetooth interface, for example, for mouses or something like that?
I wonder if there isn't a Bluetooth device for the USB cards, because the Poseidon driver, I think there is a Bluetooth device that you could use this, because actually one project I'm doing right now, another project I'm doing right now is building an expansion card with an Ethernet port. Because this is more, I think this is you need to put your Amiga to internet, or to at least to make it access your to your network test storage, and put and store some things, or load some stuff from your external hard drive, or from a Samba share somewhere in the network. So I've built up a prototype, which is a Thor 3 card, populated with an IDE interface, a clock port interface, and a LAN port. The clock port and the IDE interface are working, and the LAN port is speaking to me, so I can talk to the controller. But building the hardware is only first thing. The other thing is building the driver, and that's what actually where another friend of me, and we are busy, and we're trying to build up the driver, and because he already did an Ethernet driver for a low-end card in those days, and he knew all the stuff, but then his wife decided that he's a stupid guy and left him, and now he's out of business for half a year, arranging his new life. And personal things are always a big hassle to hobby projects. I hope that I never may have a big accident to constantly work on these things, but yeah, let's cross fingers.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea. I appreciate it. I see that you have a lot of plans and projects, and it's really impressive. And can you tell us how much time do you invest in your hobby? Basically, it's only hobby, no money behind, basically.
Yeah. No, actually, yeah. Yeah. How much time? I think I'm there, and I think I am doing it at least for 4 to 6 hours per week. So sometimes, I just I don't watch much TV. So when other people are watching Game of Thrones or something like this, or actually Game of Thrones, I'm watching, but but if you're watching some movies or something else, then I just go to the computer and. So if you're watching something else than Games of Thrones, then I would just go to my computer and say, okay, then I do because I find it my brain finds it distracting, and I really cool down by just doing some stuff. Actually, building PCBs is a little bit like puzzling or something, because you have. But it's a puzzle where you don't have a picture. How's the correct picture, and you don't know if you can do it. You just see some big mess of wires, and then you have to think, okay, I can put it here, and then I can put this there, and then this there. Okay, this looks good, and then you do it, and then they say, oh, this doesn't work, I have to redo it. And this is like it pieces my mind when I'm doing stuff like this, and that's how hardware comes from my fingers.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, some people have the other things to rest, relax, and this is good that you have this. This is better for community. Okay, so maybe now let's talk about the still hardware. But naturally I must ask you about the Vampire project, because it's really big success, and soon the Vampire 4 or V4 will come. What do you think about this FPGA design story? It's really cool, but some says that this is not real processor, some others says other things, but basically I think it's cool. But what can say hardware guy about this great work that the Apollo team made?
I really I have to say that it's amazing stuff they're doing. I think when actually the Vampire, the very first Vampire was not done by the Apollo team. Was done by, I think, by a guy called Meister. I don't know if he lives somewhere in the Balkan countries. And he told us some stories, and this I was really impressed, because this guy, I have to admit, he had no knowledge at the beginning. He was really like an absolute beginner to everything, and he made it run. It was really like a miracle. A lot of people just believe that we will never finish, because he did so many mistakes, and he showed a lot of people who know this business that he is an absolute beginner on certain things. But at the end, he made it, and I thought this is a really, really cool thing, because. Look at the prices. If you want to buy a 68030 processor with 50 megahertz, this processor is like I think your pocket calculator is faster than this thing right now, but it's and then you have to pay like 100 euros for a damn old CPU, and they are not produced anymore. So there is the day when the last processor will be sold, and everyone has the processor he wants to, and never will. And the only thing when a new processor arrives is when someone dies and puts his legacy somewhere to eBay or wherever. And that's from that point of view, I really love this whole FPGA stuff, because you can emulate the whole old CPUs and do it on the stuff. And when the Apollo team was joining Meister with the Vampire 2 for the Amiga 600, I thought that they wanted to do a little bit of the same, but they came from this old project Natami, and I talked to one of the guys on telephone, and I realized that they have a different vision. It's a good vision. Yeah, they said, oh, the Amiga operating system is so lean and so nice in some parts, and it's so small. Yeah? It fits on a 0.5 megabyte of ROM, and that's the whole system. And you can build up. Actually, I have an Amiga 500 which can browse with my turbo board and my card, and I have this Splitbox thing as Ethernet device, and I can surf even on my I can do my home banking on my Amiga 500, and it's a good system. And I said, oh, would it be a good idea to have this in fast? And so yeah, but then I personally think that now they're doing a little bit like a fork, because they said, okay, we do not stick to the old stuff, but we make this what they call 68080 processor, and it's definitely better than the 60 processor. It's faster, and they're doing a good stuff over there. But from the classic point of view, this is like a little bit like I've never, as you noticed in the beginning, I'm not this next generation, this OS4 guy. I'm not there, because when OS4 was actual, I already completely switched to Linux and Windows machines, and for doing all the modern stuff, there are so fast computers and they're so cheap. So I doesn't see the real point of the now upcoming Vampire 4, and so it is. It's a little bit like this FPGA arcade thing or the Mist board, and they are retro hardware, or they are retro hardware emulators, and really hardware emulators, not a software emulator on a PC. You can put like your old joystick. That's still a really big plus, but it is, and it doesn't really feel like the Amiga, and that's why I'm. Personally, I think I won't buy a Vampire for myself, but I think it's really, really cool hardware. And as long as I talk to the guys, they have a big plan for the future, and I appreciate this way. And people who want to go this way, feel free. I think this is a better way than relying on the PowerPC track, because that's. PowerPCs are outdated nowadays as well, and FPGAs will be in the market for a long, long time.
Yeah, true. This is. I asking myself with the Vampire, because I have here, and this is really cool. But the question is, who will write the new software for this? Because besides of, let's say, Riva movie player. There's almost nothing new, and there is a little bit power to use, but I don't expect something special, using the new Vampire, and the PowerPC story is, of course, I have as well the X5000 here, and it's to be honest, this is the cool hardware, expensive cool hardware, but I start to see that in the NG system we are approaching the lack of development. Basically, again, the browser story. I'm surprised that this Amiga OS 4 I could use completely every day if I have the modern browser there to do the video editing online, to hear the music with Spotify. This is what you said. To this you have the modern computer, and with Amiga is starting, even with NG, starting to not to be easy to do the stuff. So the Tabor is coming. So you said you are not an NG guy, but do you think it can be a big fight between Vampire and Tabor, because it's more or less same price, yeah?
I cannot tell. I think, as I said, I'm speaking with one guy of the Apollo teams for 2 or 3 hours on the telephone, and we shared some ideas. And they even asked me if I could help them. And I said, I'm not that. I think I will. I'm not that I'm not reliable enough for their kind of things what they are doing, because they told me a little bit of the process of the Atomic project, and they said that one guy in their team was a little bit, oh no, it is just a hobby, and all of a sudden he stopped working, and that's why the Atomic project, or one reason why the Atomic project didn't finish. And I said, so I really see the risk that I will be the next guy who's not the reliable one in this project, and so no, I will not do this. I will give you advice if you ask me, but I will not. I don't want to be to be responsible of not finishing my job. Yeah, that's and I have that was basically the stuff. But when I talk to him, I really know that that they are really professional guys. They have good jobs, as far as I know, at big German companies doing latest technology stuff, and they just take the knowledge they have from these companies and put it and build up or rebuild the Amiga, because I think it's a good system. So, but again, yeah, I think the most important thing for them is to persuade the developers that development on native Vampire hardware with this nice features, which is next generation features for this, that they have to do things like that. And I personally have my doubts that this will take place, because software developers, they are a different kind of people, not myself. They are used to use certain software, certain tools, and if they have to adopt too much, then they say, "Oh, do I really have to do this, or I can do something else?" And that's I think that's a big risk on the Vampire project, because they are building something completely new. On the other hand, if I look at OS4 and Hyperion, they're now in the past they fought with Amiga Incorporation, and now they fight with Cloanto, and of course they want to earn some money, and they put a lot of effort, and they developed a lot of stuff. But I think the Amiga market is so small that from my opinion, you cannot earn money at all in this department. You can perhaps earn a little bit side money, but it doesn't pay your rent, or if you work there. And if you and that's why I don't think that Hyperion will succeed for a long time, because they cannot. The Amiga market is still too cheap. But on the other hand, the Vampire team is as far as I know, they're treating they're not making big advertisement to the software developers, or to enough software developers. They have to, it's a little bit like we build the nice hardware, so you have to adapt to us. But the software developers, no, I don't have to do anything, because I can do whatever I want. And in this situation, right now, this is a dangerous situation, and I hope for everyone that it will find a good solution for everybody. Perhaps we will get a Vampire for the X5000, stuff like this.
Yeah, I think you have a lot of right with this software side, because sorry, it doesn't matter is the Vampire or the NG software, because I see that people are not. They don't want to do stuff, or they, like you said, okay, it's too much work to do, I don't care, I will not do it, because there is no money behind this. But to finish this story, maybe I have the one question about the hardware, because I was thinking some years ago if this is possible to make PCI for Amiga 2000, for example.
Yes, and definitely it is possible to do so. For instance, the Picasso 3 board has actually a PCI interface on it working. So there is so they adopted the chip on the PCI interface and put it to source a card. So it is possible. And I thought about building up a PCI interface, but I have to admit that I haven't gone too deep in how the PCI interface actually works. There is this Prometheus board, and you can find it somewhere in the internet if you look at it, and there are some schematics on it and some files, and you could rebuild it. But then another German guy, Michael Böhmer, he actually did this. And he said that there are some flaws in it, and it doesn't work properly. So in theory, it is possible to do something like this. And on the other hand, you really have to think about for the Amiga 2000 is a PCI interface where to plug it, because the Zorro 2 interface is limited to 3.5 megabytes per second. That's the maximum you can transfer over this bus, and if you come up with an PCI card, or even you could put a PCI to PCI Express adapter on it and plug in, for instance, a new NVIDIA GT, whatever. Okay, NVIDIA is not supported, but a new Radeon, whatever, 570 graphic boards on it. The bandwidth would be limited to 3.5 megabyte on the Zorro interface, and this would be really, really slow if you if you expect like cool hardware. So putting the Zorro, the building a Zorro 2 PCI adapter will open a lot of people to have access to cheap PC hardware stuff, for like instance RAID controllers, LAN cards, and all this stuff, but it will be very, very slow, and they will be disappointed by the performance, I presume. So it makes more sense of putting the PCI controller on a turbo board and put it like a PCI card on a turbo card, and then putting on the Zorro 2 interface, because it came from 1986, and that's really long time ago.
Okay, this is true that Zorro 2, I know it. It's really slow. It's ridiculous slow. But yeah, nice to have.
For those days, it wasn't. Yeah. But if you look at, for instance, I'm thinking more about this. If you have this Cyberstorm, Cyber Vision concept, that's actually good design, because they build up a turbo board and then they have their own connector. Actually, the Cyber Vision is a Matrox per media with a PCI interface plugged in on the card. So I think it would be easy. It would be easy to build some adapter for this. For B-Vision connector to PCI interface, but who owns the Cyber Vision or the Cyber Power or this Cyberstorm turbo card? That's about how many have they sold? 10,000 perhaps. Yeah, so that's you have to do it all by yourself. And I think I'm thinking about it, but my ideas are not ready yet.
Okay, so can you tell us let's say the schedule that you have, what we can expect in the near future or not so near from you? So, yeah, which projects are the priority one, for example?
Yeah. I have to. Yeah, but the actual priority one project is the 68060 accelerator card for the Amiga 3000 4000. There is right now I'm doing a lot of prototyping, and my desk looked like a mess, and there are two different 060 cards lying around. I have to admit, today none of them are working, but I have to think to look where the bug is. They worked, as I said, but they are unstable. So this is actually my current field of work, building this turbo board. The key features I think will be like 128 megabytes of RAM, and I'm still thinking of putting an IDE controller on the next revision, so that if you own an Amiga 3000, that you finally have a fast IDE controller, because SCSI is so much better, but there are no SCSI drives anymore, and for IDE you can still buy adapters to adapt it to all kinds of hard drives. And that's why I personally think that IDE is the only possible solution for Amiga, and the Amiga 3000 is lacking a fast IDE device.
Okay, cool. Okay, next question. I think we are starting, let's say, to land. What Amiga or which Amiga you can advise to buy, for example, from hardware point of view? Let's say I would like to have it expanded a little bit, but I would like to have the hardware reliable, that I can go to the party with this. I will not have the problem with, when you have 1200 with the PowerPC, PCI, and this was like, when you touch it, it was, oh god, yeah, done. So what is good to have, for example, for the Amiga parties and so on?
I've always take my Amiga 500 with me, because this is it's a nice design. It's very robust. You can do anything. You can just drop it and kick it around, and it still works. But a lot of people say that the Amiga 600, because it's so small, is more handy to bring somewhere else. And if you own a Vampire on it, or have a decent accelerator, and have a solution that doesn't pop up from the processor, then I say it depends on you. If you have an Amiga 506, and it's up to you if you like 500 or 600 more. The downside, of course, is that it has no AGA chipset. So if you want to run some cool AGA demos or games, then you really have to take the Amiga 1200. But I would only put up some memory board, or a very or an AK acceleration board to the Amiga 1200 for transport, because they are quite robust. But another thing is, if you are the guy who just or takes out the Amiga from time to time and put it in the shelf and let it be, perhaps for half a year or a year, then I would again suggest an Amiga 500, because the Amiga 1200 has this issue with the capacitors, that they have SMD capacitors which start to leak, and if you do not open your Amiga for at least once a year and look if everything is still alright, then there's this the liquid in these capacitors it's a kind of acid, will damage your computer, and if you're not constantly using it, you will not notice it, and then it's probably too late to repair it, or it takes a lot of effort to repair it, and that's why I would suggest an Amiga 500, because this is robust. I have never seen an Amiga 500 with leaking capacitors. I have seen some with leaking batteries from these trapdoor expansions. So if you have an Amiga 500 with this trapdoor expansion, please take it out. And if there's a battery on it, please remove the battery, because that's a killer to your computer. And then and that's my advice. Yeah, I had actually 2 days ago we had our annual Amiga party in Berlin. We were 16 guys playing with Amigas, and we had one X5000 and two Amiga 500s, and one Amiga 4000 standing there, and yeah, but it was a garden party, but actually more barbecue and partying and drinking beer than playing with computers. But it's you see that there were Amiga 500 is, from my point of view, the party computer.
Good to hear that in Berlin there are some parties, Amiga parties. Maybe I will visit someday. One question about this story that you told with this capacitors, because I heard there are maybe two schools. Some guys said we should change them. Doesn't matter they are okay or not. some guys say, let's control it, but do not touch if you don't need.
It depends. So the first question is, why are these capacitors actually leaking? Because they're not built to leak. I suggest that at those days, because it was the first time when Commodore, or like in the early days when SMD production came up, that they did and that they, for instance, soldered it too hot in those days, and it worked for 5 or 10 years, but not worked for 20 years. So that's my and I suspect this is the reasons why they actually leak. So if you have a batch where they were soldered right, then you will never have problems with them, but you cannot tell. And if you say, oh, let's repair them, even when nothing, when you can see nothing because you don't, or let's change it because you have nothing to repair, this depends. How good how good are you at desoldering these capacitors? Because it's not beginner stuff to do so, and you can ruin your board quite easily, and especially but that's always the case, because if this corrosive liquid came down on your PCB, then it starts corroding the pad of the capacitor. So what happens quite often is that when you desolder the capacitor, the pad comes off as well. And then you have a bigger problem, because you have to repair the connection to the pad. And this is definitely not beginner stuff anymore. So if you know what you're doing, you can solder, then I would say exchange it, because the parts cost nothing, and it's better to do it once, and then then you know that you don't have to look for the next 10 years. But if you are not that good, then I would advise, go to someone who can do it, and see what he advises you to do, and perhaps trust it, because he knows his skills, he has his own experience. And then another issue is, a lot of people right now, they exchange the old electrolyte capacitors with ceramic ones, because ceramics are said to have no liquid inside, so they cannot leak at all. But, and this is a big but, and some parts of the Amiga, the electrolyte capacitors, they are placed at the video area and at the audio area, and in these areas, the electrolytic capacitors behave differently than the ceramic ones, and so you might have a distorted sound or like a strange graphic artifacts afterwards. And so this is always it's not a good advice to exchange every capacitor to a ceramic one, but some some of them you can exchange them, and that's a good idea, because then you don't have any worries in the future. So again, it really depends on the state of the board. If you say this is the board is cool and it has like collective, it's a collector, and there's no leakage as well, then you have to decide, do I want to remove the capacitors and replace it with new stuff, because this is not original one. They are not the original ones. If you say you're original guy and you don't have any leakage on the board, don't change them until they start to leak. But then you honestly have to check every year. And if you're using your Amiga, I would suggest, and you're on it and you have put all the components and have the board lying on your desk, then it's a time difference of 5 minutes of exchanging all of them, except of exchanging only the broken one. And 5 minutes is not that much of time.
Now it's clear. Maybe the last question. What do you think about this retro Amiga scene, or maybe not only retro Amiga scene? What do you think, how it would look like to be in next years? Because this year, for example, we have the big party in Noise, 32 years of party in the noise, but do you think in 5 years, because now the Amiga is exploded, the parties are everywhere, everybody are going to different countries, and do you think this is the trend, or this is only few years events?
I think okay, I personally started with retro computing in 2011. So from my point of view, retro is and I'm not a trendsetter. I'm kind of hipster because everyone came back to the computer. It's like for a computer engineer, your first computer is like your first kiss with a girl. Yeah, you can't forget it, because this was when you had this amazing, completely different, but an amazing experience of this technique. And then and now it's the people who had the Amiga at first time, they're in good jobs and they have some time perhaps, and they have the money that they have to do so. And this is from my point of view the crucial thing. Are the young people adopting to the Amiga or seeing because it's cool to make like the old school demos, old school games? A lot of people do actually. But they don't have the emotions with the computers I do. I have. So let's see, because it's from my point of view, the platform Amiga is great, and you can do a lot of stuff, and it's even cool to see what people can do in the past with such limited hardware, with just 7 megahertz and half megabyte of RAM or 1 megabyte of RAM. But however, it was like it's nothing, and they could do amazing stuff with it. And this is what's fascinating even younger people right now. Yesterday or 2 days ago on the party, the youngest guy was 19 on there, but there are only a few 19 old guys doing retro computing. The most people are doing are in the mid 30s or even in the 40s. I think we have to see if it would be interesting if the retro wave evolves like the computer in those times. So if the retro wave now switches over to Super Nintendo and Pentium 1 PC boards, then we see like history evolving. But I think the Amiga had a strong community, and it will never completely die. Perhaps it will get a little bit quieter, but I think there will be at least an annual big party in Berlin for as long as I'm here, and there will be and other events over Europe as long as the people stay with Amiga.
And you talk about the Nintendo, for example, they are making now quite good money in this SNES Mini, NES Mini, and so on, these consoles. Do you think in this Amiga retro scene, can we expect that in the future they will appear some money from software side, hardware side? I'm not talking about them making a lot of money, but it will be a little bit more than just doing the stuff for nothing.
Yes, it's. I personally think it won't happen. Not because the people want it. I think a lot of people want it, but I think that it won't happen because of the fucked up situation with Commodore bankruptcy, because Nintendo still exists. Yeah, they own everything, and if they say, oh, we built a retro Super Nintendo, they own all the rights and they have all the stuff. Who can actually build an Amiga computer without there is no real owner of the, or there are several parties who say, "Oh, we have the legacy of Commodore," but they're fighting, and so the sad situation is that it's not clear. So actually, if you, for instance, if you go to Hyperion and say, "So I want to rebuild an Amiga," then the first thing is, "So we're not interested in retro. We want to sell Amiga 4.1." So okay, yeah, but I want. If you then say, "Okay, but I want to build. Can you give me some licenses to do so?" Then it says, "So yeah, we can give you some, but there will be another parties who say they have the license and we don't have the license." So actually, if you are investing there, then you run the risk of that someone else saying, "So, oh no, they don't own it, we own it." If you ask them, then you say, "So, oh, we own it," and then, but if you own it from us, they will sue you and put you to court. And no one wants to be in such a situation of when he just wants to build a product for fun, finding himself in court, and the two parties are that you did all what you do. Yeah, they say, "Oh, I tried to license it, but now someone else is claiming that he has a license," and that's bad. That's a nasty situation. And I really hate the situation. From a personal point of view, it would be better if Hyperion and the other party is Cloanto, if they both would become bankrupt and somehow a nice rich guy just buys the remainings of both companies and says, "Now we have everything together in one place." No one cares who had the more right to do so. That would be my wish. Sad for Cloanto, sad for Hyperion, but this would be the best thing from my point of view to end this stupid situation.
Okay, yeah, I think you have quite a lot of maybe right here, because I'm really disgusted with this situation that we are so small community, and still after so many years after there was wars in NG camp, then we have the, like you say, the fight Hyperion with Cloanto, and this is really it's whatever. It was really positive interview, I think, so let's leave it like is it now.
It's a curse, and that's the Amiga curse.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's even if you want to do something, you cannot. Okay, but I think it is 1.5 hours, so it's so I think we can start to finish. So in this situation, I would like to ask you to make some greetings or something, to say hello to somebody, something like that.
Oh, actually, I won't greet people in person, because all my friends, they do a great job. The people, and I personally think would like to say thank you to the whole Amiga community, because I get a lot of thank yous and a lot of positive feedback on my hardware, and this means a lot to me. And I really appreciate that you like my work, and and that you using some of the things I'm using, and I want to say everyone to you, thank you of keeping the future alive and staying with the Amiga, and Amiga.
Cool. One question at the end of all. Will you be visiting the Neuss? It's in Germany. You are living 600 kilometers from Neuss, yeah? Something like that.
Yes, I was really hard thinking about it. I have to disappoint you. I will not be there. This is mainly because on that weekend I'm busy with something else, and I cannot do it. Otherwise, I would get a lot of trouble with my wife, and I would I have to say, family first, then Amiga, and then my job. Perhaps my job comes sometimes first because I have to pay my rent, but not in real life. I don't want it like this.
Maybe next time you can visit some parties there. There are some even in Poland there was the great party last weekend, so and this week I think is again. So from to Poland you have not so much kilometers at least, so maybe we can do some party together, or I will be someday in the Berlin. Why not?
Of course. That would be if someone tells me, oh, there's a good party in Poland or wherever, and I know some people, I would like to go there. Yeah, and if it's not that far away, because Poland is quite a big country, and if it's like on the east side, and then it's far away, the noise.
Yeah, but from Berlin you have a lot of planes, I think, to most city in Poland. And I think this can be nice for you because we have in Poland some guys like Krashan, for example. It's really well known, but there's much more guys hardware involved. So probably I think you can exchange your experience or maybe get some new ideas, and it can be it's profit for everybody and more work for you. Cool for us.
Yes. Yeah, I will definitely think about it. So if you, I'm really sorry that I can definitely not read Polish. So if some people just give me some, contact me and say, oh, there are cool parties over there, just have a look at it. It's not on my radar. So if you take care that it's on my radar, I will really think about picking up some Berlin guys, and then we pop up with 3 or 4 person at some Polish party and see what they are doing to the Amiga, because that's what unites. Actually, it's what unites every one of us. Yeah, cool computer from those days.
Okay, it was pleasure to me to talk about these great projects. I hope we will see more of them from you, and I hope we will meet us in some place. At some party. So thank you again for your time, and enjoy the night.
It is, yeah. Thank you too, Chris. It was my interview.
It was AMIcast, podcast for all Amiga users.